And so you are the peace of this moment. You are the being that is ever free, omnipresent, silent, peace. And you have never been anything other than yourself. There has been a great misunderstanding. And when the great misunderstanding is believed, there is a sense of a tangle in consciousness, like a miscommunication in the lines. The lines are tangled, and there can be an identification with a belief that I am a person that is separate from the whole. But this is not the truth. What we are here for is to remember what is true, to remember. You cannot become, you cannot create a process that has a goal. There is nothing to achieve. It is to remember who you are in truth, what you have always been, the eternal, timeless being that you are. It is to let go of all ideas that there is a process that has to be followed, that there is a readiness, a timing. What we are speaking of is the timeless, eternal being. And the clear discovery of this truth is right here now. And it is available to all beings. All beings belong to the one being. And in this moment, in the moment, the now, in the silence, in the stillness, there is a peace. There is a peace that is undisturbed by any moving, changing ebbs and flows of life. There is a peace that is always peace. It is the silent stillness of the being. So we are remembering this truth, and in the felt sense of being here, the I am presence, the sense of simply being, before the first thought identifies with the mind and the body, with the phenomena, with the sense perception, before the first identification happens that creates a sense of being separate, of being the person, identifying at the singular point. Before all of that, the I am presence, the simple presence that is alive, 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 simply here now, this presence of being knows its peace. And this is available to every being in this moment. It is just to come to the peace that is already here, to let go of the addiction to keep moving in the realm of story. It is a great misunderstanding and a compulsive addiction to keep moving within the habituated idea of the me and the story. There is nothing to work out. There's nothing to get. There's nothing to process. It's about being here, being the peace of the moment, and recognizing that as the peace of the moment, you are, in fact, in truth, actually, completely and utterly free. It is when the longing for freedom is greater than the longing for the story that the balance starts to tip. And this is about a divine readiness. It's not in the timing of a me that is achieving something, can create a goal. It is when there is a maturity in the consciousness, naturally, the pull inward, the pull to this peace, the ability to recognize this peace as the truth of who you are, is just so alive and remembered, recognized, recognized. Because what you are is consciousness. What you are is the consciousness. And it is about consciousness itself remembering, recognizing its pure essence nature. This whole unfolding into the remembering of yourself does not take place in the misunderstanding. How could it? It does not take place in the story. It takes place before all of that, in the silent peace of true essence nature. In truth, it is not kindness to collaborate with story, even though the ego might think it is. It's not supportive to collaborate with story, even though ego might like that better. It's not about collaborating with what the ego wants, needs, thinks is the right way to behave. Love loves so profoundly that love is willing to upset the ego in order for the greater truth to be recognized. It is about resting in the peace and being the peace, just being the peace, being the simple peace. And it takes the most incredible resolve to recognize this and stay here. The recognition part is fairly simple because it's here now in this moment, every moment. The resting here in the silence, in the stillness, is what takes the resolve. It takes resolve to not keep going towards the story, the drama, the way that the me continually tangles itself deeper in. Whatever the me thinks this is all about, whatever the me thinks is the way to this freedom, it's not correct. It's all part of the great misunderstanding. In simplicity, it is about not identifying with the moving, changing, not identifying with the story, but identifying only with your own presence, letting identification rest as being aware of your own presence. There's no how-to or instructions that can be given to the mind because it's not for the mind. There are no instructions. There's just nothing there. There's nothing that can be given to the mind to bring this truth in the way that the mind thinks or imagines that maybe it could be. There's nothing that can be given because it's not for the mind. The mind, the thinking, the process, yes, that consciousness is all part of the one consciousness, but not in the way that it thinks in limitation. It is only when we can see as the unlimited, pure, simple consciousness, awake and aware, that we can see how everything belongs. before that, we actually have to speak of you are not the mind, you are not the story, you are not the body. We have to speak like this because the mind cannot understand the wholeness, and the mind will conceptualize that, and it will say, oh, well, I can just rest here and just keep on the way that I've been going. But that's not really going to get you into the freedom that is longed for, right? To come to the freedom that is longed for is to get underneath. How do you get underneath? You relax. You let go. Let go into the peace of this moment. Let go into what you cannot understand. Let go into where these words are pointing to, where they are carrying you. Let go. Just jump on the train with no destination. Let the doors close and be carried into the remembering of divine wholeness. There's nothing that you can do. It is utterly, utterly hopeless, incredibly hopeless, profoundly hopeless. Absolutely nada, not a thing that you can do. And yet the constant invitation, be here now, be here now, be the I am presence. Anything that could be worked through the mind, you don't need to take notes. Notes are for the mind. It is to be absorbed in this moment, deeply absorbed in this moment. You don't need to take mental notes. You don't need to have your pen and paper at the ready. It's about being here, so fully present that you merge into the nowness of this moment, merge into the resonance of these words and be carried into the remembering. Let go of all sense of responsibility, where the me feels like I've got to get myself there, I've got to do this, I've got expectations. All of that is just to be surrendered, let go of. You cannot do a single thing. In a way, the most profound moment is to let go into the hopelessness, let go into the sense, can do nothing. There's nothing to be done. And in that letting go, you are available for grace to bring the light in. In the letting go, the softness, the relaxation, you are available for the remembering to shine from within you, from within your own presence, from within your own knowing, within your own being, your own deep, silent, still, innermost being, innermost heart of hearts. When there is a letting go, a relaxation, the remembering shines. You are not becoming something or changing into something that you are not already. You are remembering, relaxing deeply enough, softening so that you can actually subtly perceive. So we guide this very simply by the first invitation is to perceive the felt sense of your own presence. You start to perceive the felt sense of your own presence. The mind can even make this into a challenging instruction, but it's not. It's just to be here. Are you here? Yes. How do you know you are here? You just are, right? Seems like a silly question because it's so obvious. but where the knowing is that you are here. This is what we are pointing to, is this felt sense of presence, of just being, and that this felt sense of presence is very still. Presence is still, and yet it is also alive. There's an aliveness to it, an aliveness to this presence, and yet the presence is still and unmoving. And as this presence, start to notice that you are aware. So now we are speaking to you, the presence, right? This is what the speaking is speaking to. We could say that what is speaking and what is listening is the same. We are not speaking to the mind. It is to listen with the being, listen with the heart. Do not listen with the me that's trying to understand or get it. There's nothing to get. Let go of that idea. There's no truth in it. There's nothing to get, nothing to understand, nowhere to get to. It's just to be here, to be here. And in the felt sense of presence, start to recognize that there is an awareness to this presence, that presence is witnessing. So witnessing presence. Presence is witnessing, aware of the moving, changing. So aware of the thoughts, aware of the thoughts, because everything is really just a thought. Aware of the body sensations, aware of sense perception. Essentially, there's an evaluation happening through the mind, and so it's really just to be aware of thinking happening. Be aware of the moving, changing thought waves. Don't try to push them away or stop them. Don't try to change this moment, because the one that tries to change this moment is the mind. It's an interceptor of the mind. There's nothing to change, nothing to do. We're not trying to create a special environment or a particular spiritual atmosphere or mood. Nothing is needed. This is the great glory. You're fully equipped, absolutely fully equipped. Nothing else is needed. You don't need to create anything. Nothing is missing. All that is required is to be here, and to be here so fully that there's a relaxation into the presence. Can naturally notice that the body starts to relax. Body as in physicality, muscles, tensions, everything starts to relax. But it's not really about that. But if it wants to join in, then it makes it feel so much smoother and softer. The physicality just joins in. Soft, relaxed, at ease. Let go, right? Just this simple moment, just like this. And that the presence of being is awake and aware of the moving, changing. And yet, let's get more intimate, aware of the moving, changing, but as the moving, changing, aware of yourself being completely undisturbed by the moving, changing, aware of, right? So the great misunderstanding happens where the attention that is aware zooms towards something in the field, an object of experience, zooms towards a thought, zooms towards something and identifies there. And the great misunderstanding happens when identification takes place at the singular point of the mind-body and the thinking starts to revolve around a me. This is my name, this is where I live, this is what my job is, this is my family, these are my needs, these are my desires, these are my likes, these are my preferences, this is what makes me feel safe, this is what I think about this moment, right? And then the thinking process is, what do I think of this moment? What do I think of this moment? What do I think of this moment? It's a constant evaluating and analyzing the moment according to a me, using sense perception and fragmenting the moment, right? That's the great misunderstanding, is that that is who you are. But it's not the truth. Let's just notice in this moment that the felt sense of being, just to notice that the felt sense of yourself is actually in the felt sense of being. That when we're watching the thoughts, that the felt sense of being is still here. Watching the thoughts, aware of the thoughts, aware of the body, aware of mind, aware of the person, the character. And yet the felt sense of yourself is really, in truth, with the being. That there's a sense of yourself with the being, with the stillness. Actually feels more alive and more free than you've ever felt. You're not burdened and tangled up in all of those messy thoughts, all of those ideas, the story and the drama. That in this moment, the felt sense of yourself is this being that is just here, just like this. Just like this. You cannot understand it with the mind. And this is often where the trouble starts, is that the felt sense of being the being is obvious and free and beautiful and peaceful. And then the mind says, I'll have a piece of that pie. And it wants to understand, right? It wants to bring it right into the me. Oh, am I free? No, you're not actually, right? We have to just be aware of these subtleties, that as soon as the me wants a piece of the pie, then there's identification. That identification of attention has shifted. And it's so quick, adept, very adept, habituated, well practiced. So we've got to give it that. It knows how to do it. It knows how to identify into the great misunderstanding. But the great misunderstanding is miserable. Even on a good day, even on the best day, in truth, it's miserable because you're just waiting for the next hit. The longing for freedom, the longing for love, for happiness, for ease, for smoothness, for God, whatever it is that we're longing for, it's all right here in the peace of the moment. So, right here now, the felt sense, the peace of this moment, just like this. Awake and aware, the felt sense of being. Just to notice how the felt sense of being can feel yourself. You can feel a sense that this is what you are. You are this peace. You are this silence. You are the stillness. Now, just notice subtly where that recognition is, that it's like a remembering that you've always been this. You've always been this. This, we could say, part of you has never ever been anywhere else but here. But it's been overlooked because the attention keeps wandering to the great misunderstanding. So this truth is always here. And when you can feel this truth, it's so obvious, so obvious. It's obvious that this is a part of you. It's obvious that this is known and familiar, and that the knowing is in the being itself. This being itself is awake and aware. The awakeness is the simple knowing of itself, right? The mind gives all of this awakening, awakening. What's awakening? I want to awaken, right? But the awakeness is so humble and simple. The awakeness is just the being knowing itself. The simple knowing is that it's awake to itself, that it sees itself, it knows itself. It's just like, oh, yep, this is what I am. Good news, right? It's very, very simple. It's not what the mind imagines, even those concepts. I want to awaken, but awakening only happens to, sages and saints, and it's not for me, but I want it anyway, right? All of these ideas. The mind creates all these ideas. Well, I really want that, but it's really hard. It's really, really hard. In truth, it's so simple to be the awake being. The part that's hard is untangling yourself from the great misunderstanding. The coming to the awakeness of the being is actually quite simple. But there has to be a resting here and a deep recognition. You can't just take a quick kiss and run back to the me. You have to hang around for the full embrace of the divine. You have to give yourself fully to this love, right? It's not a quick flirtation that, oh, yep, presence, peace, yep, that's what I am. Okay, back to the story. Let's get back on with my life. No, you have to give yourself fully to this. This is like a forever thing. That's what we're speaking about with eternal. It's a forever. It's a love affair. It's forever. It's a love affair with yourself. Everything has to be given to this. It's not a half-hearted kind of thing. It's a wholehearted, whole self in. Remember, take off the costume and remember that what you are is utterly free of the story. So the mind creates so many concepts. And then within the world of delusion, the play of the world, of the collective consciousness, is selling all of those concepts. It's trying to sell you all those concepts. Really what's happening is the consciousness that's in a tangle is creating a reflection of its tangle. So the only place where there's truth is in the presence of now. And nobody can give you this. Nobody can give you this. Even the most profoundly enlightened being can only point you to yourself, into the silence, into the stillness. The surrender is yours. The letting go is yours. So the pointing keeps pointing. The invitation is constantly being offered now, to be here now. To confirm in the innermost being that in this moment, that there is a remembering that what you are in truth is the silence, is the stillness, is the presence of being that is simple and awake. The awakeness is where consciousness is consciously awake to its own essence, nature. And it's right here in the silence, in the stillness of pure presence. So to notice the presence is you, can feel like the presence is all around you. The aliveness of the presence can feel like it's in you, it's around you. This is the beauty where as you come to presence, you actually start to recognize the unboundedness of your own presence. When you can feel that the presence seems to be all around you, it's because you're starting to subtly perceive that the presence is indeed everywhere. It's not tucked away inside the body of the me. It's not tucked away anywhere. It's completely free. It's everywhere. So where you can sense that it's everywhere, all around you, inside you, outside you, there's a perception of consciousness itself recognizing that there is a sense of its own essence that is everywhere and alive and awake to itself, right? That aliveness is the awakeness of consciousness. The consciousness is always awake and it's always unbounded. It's a whole unbounded field. And as we relax into the presence, we merge out of the mind consciousness that is a surface frequency, a denser frequency. We merge into a finer frequency. So what is really happening here as these words are coming? They are transmitting the finer frequency of the essence nature, and as they are being received, there is a natural softening and relaxation into the finer frequency. So you, as a me, are not doing anything. What is happening is that consciousness is recognizing a finer frequency of itself and attuning to that finer frequency. And in attuning to a finer frequency, starts to resonate at that finer frequency and just lets go of that denser thinking frequency, right? There's a softening, a relaxation, a natural surrender. And it's not happening through the person. It's happening in the consciousness that you are made out of. So that's why there's often a spontaneous dropping in and a sudden recognizing, oh, I'm suddenly attuned to what's being spoken. It suddenly makes sense. And the way that it really makes sense is not through the mind. It's the intelligence of the awake field, the field of awake consciousness is a field of intelligence. It knows itself, and the words then start to resonate and land within the intelligence, and there's a sense of it making sense. It's not really actually going through the mind, because of course the mind can't make sense. It's making sense in the intelligence of consciousness. The field itself is really just resonating and attuned with the finer flows and frequencies of its own nature. So you start to feel more of a sense of softness and relaxation, a sense of being the being yourself. And so in this sense of being yourself, the remembering is just the familiarity, the sense of freedom, the sense of the familiar, the sense of peace. Oh yes, this has always been here. I have always been this. And let's say what gets called the awakening is where inside the point that you have believed yourself to be, inside the consciousness that makes you up, you the consciousness just simply being, where the consciousness is very subtly conscious of itself. And so as these words come, consciousness is intelligently following these words. So the consciousness recognizes its pure essence nature. And there's a recognition, a remembering, where consciousness confirms within itself, within, we could say, the innermost being, like the innermost subtlety of the consciousness that is pure, there's an awake awareness that just sparks into a clarity that remembers, oh, this is what I am. I'm this pure consciousness. I'm not mind consciousness. I'm pure consciousness. I'm the awake field of consciousness. This is the awakening that gets spoken about. You see, it's a very simple, subtle little seeing in consciousness. And yet this little seeing changes everything. It means that then the attention of awareness, even though it can identify with the moving, changing, it knows without question its true essence nature. And it tends to identify with its own essence nature because it's finer and purer and more natural. And this naturally brings a sense of being very spacious and unbounded and free. Being the presence, the felt sense is being the unbounded presence. The felt sense is being the wide open, vast, infinite space. And so the felt sense of yourself suddenly feels to be very vast, and you can't find yourself as a singular point. You can't find yourself as being separate from the consciousness that is pure, because you are consciousness, and it is your consciousness that discovers that it is unbounded and pure, whole and free. Once this knowing in the innermost being is remembered, there will still be a habituated pull into the me because there's residue to clear up, right? But it's to not lose sight of this truth of who you are. So we're right in the innermost subtlety of consciousness right now. Your consciousness is the one consciousness. And we're right in the subtlety, the inner chamber, the innermost being, where consciousness can very clearly see itself, knows itself. And here, the silence is so profound. The stillness is so profound. So this remembering is deep in the silence of your own being, deep in the peace of your own being. It's coming through the presence into the stillness, deeper, deeper, deeper into the subtle, finer perception of the silence, where the consciousness is awake and aware of itself and remembers itself right deep in here, in the innermost sanctuary of the heart. So there's nothing to do. This is where that cheeky old mind can come in and be like, yep, I'm right here. I'm right here in the inner sanctuary. I think I'm getting close. But no, 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 you see. That's just a thought away. That's just a little trip back up to the surface. As soon as you're aware of a thought, be aware of it. And as you are aware of it, you drop right back into the inner sanctuary again. Because the inner sanctuary, it's a fine frequency. And only the fine frequency can be in the inner sanctuary, let's say. The denser frequency of mind can't get in. It's like the difference between a big, great rock and a itsy bitsy fleck of dust that you see dancing in the sunlight, right? It's the difference. So the big rock can't get into the inner sanctuary because it's just too big, too dense. But it tries, and it puts on a little interceptor costume and says, yep, 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 I'm right here. Is this it? Is this it? I think I've got it, right? Or it starts saying, I'm never going to get it. I'm never going to get it. I'm a failure. I'm hopeless. It will try whatever ever it can. I mean, it's creative. It's creative. But that's the great misunderstanding. In the innermost sanctuary of the innermost being, the innermost heart, yourself, your true essence nature, it's all about the resonance. It's all about the felt sense, and that you do have a knowing here. And if the attention doesn't just go to that mind that wants the piece of the pie, that just tries to jump in, if you don't let the attention identify with the mind, and you really stay resolute in the felt sense of the peace of the presence, just this, just this, just this, then the silence can really come alive. The silence is the finest frequency, and the silence has to come really, really alive, so that the silence knows itself. It's the silence that remembers itself, right? It's this innermost being, this deep, fine perception of consciousness that is silent and pure. It knows itself, and the knowing is the stop. It's the stop where everything just stops. When there's a stop, the silence is so rich that there's a stop. In the stop, consciousness can see itself in the light of awareness, because there are no ripples. There are no ripples, no thought waves. Consciousness just sees itself like seeing the clear reflection, the crystalline clear reflection in absolutely still water. You cannot even see that there's water there, right? This is how clear the reflection has to be for the knowing to spark this remembering. Now we can take a little kiss, we can take a little glimpse, a little taste. But for this remembering to really get a good, long, clear seeing, it's to stare right into the silence of your own heart. Stare into the silence of being. Stare right into your own pure nature. Just stare right in utter presence, luminous presence. Get a really clear sense of the knowing that you are this presence of being. You are this silence. That you never have been separate. You have never been the person in the way that you have imagined, that you've always been this consciousness and this felt sense of knowing this part of yourself is such a profound remembering, such a profound sense of freedom, that in this moment, the knowing is that you are this freedom, you are this peace, this wide awake field of silent presence that is utterly peaceful, not a single ripple in the ocean, just deep, deep in the silent depths, still and silent. Here there is an unshakable knowing, unquestionable knowing. This is who you are. This is the true essence nature. And so, to whatever capacity consciousness can taste itself right now, it will taste, it's tasting. And just to revel in the taste, right? And noticing that even if this has already been recognized before, there's still such a deliciousness to get right into the subtlety, to get right into the fine feeling and feel the remembering of the deep freedom. Where the knowing is already in place, the knowing will feel very alive, like a flow, flowing, the knowing flowing. So wherever you are in this unfolding, just to fall deeply into yourself, to let go into the innocence, the purity, the simplicity of just being. There's nothing to do, nothing to achieve, no expectations, just a simple moment of being yourself, just falling into this moment It's like falling into openness, falling into freedom, like tripping over your own feet and just, wow, here's the field, the wide open, awake field, silent and still, a pure depth of peace here. There's nothing to do. If there are thoughts enlivened, it's just to come to be aware of the thoughts. The resolve is to drop into witnessing. Every being has the capacity to come to the presence and be the witness. And then just to watch the thoughts. Now, this is the part that is hard, is to not identify as the thoughts come, because the habit to identify is so deeply ingrained. So this is the part that's hard. And it takes resolve and it takes courage. But the deeper the taste of the true essence nature, there's more smoothness. When the knowing is really in place, that you know that you are not the separate one, you are not the story, you are not the mind body, that what you are is the vast open field. Once this knowing is in place, then this is the sanctuary. Just to keep coming to this knowing. And otherwise, it is to just keep coming to being the witness. Because at some point, the witness that's witnessing and watching, it receives the invitation to witness itself. And then the witness disappears into itself. And really then the witnessing is just everywhere. There's still an awareness, but the awareness is everywhere. The first layer that we open to being the witnessing presence, the witness still feels to be associated with the me, even though it's not the me. It's still close, right? It's still got a capacity of attachment there. And it's watching. Let the witness watch the thoughts. Let the witness watch the story. But recognize and keep confirming that the witness is not touched by the story, that the witness is always free. And the witness is the presence consciousness. And at some point, the witnessing presence consciousness recognizes itself as the pure seer. It shifts out of individuality to being the being that is the pure field of awareness. But it naturally happens that the witness that's witnessing the moving, changing, recognizes that it's not touched or disturbed by what is moving and changing, and then starts to naturally inquire, well, what am I? What am I then? And it starts to witness itself. And when the witness witnesses itself, clearly, when awareness is aware of itself, it falls into itself. It just falls into the sense of being the whole field of awake awareness, and the sense of being the being that is awake to itself, knowing itself. So the sense of the awakeness is being awake to that you are not the person, being awake to the knowing, really through recognition. Of course, the knowing cannot be conceptual or with the mind. The knowing is a deep-rooted recognition in the being itself, where consciousness remembers itself, in its pure essence nature. In the silence, in the stillness, in the stop that is pure silence, the remembering is here. Remember the freedom, remember the openness, the emptiness. Remember the sense of being yourself unbounded and free. Remember that you are timeless, eternal being, and that you never ever have been anything other than yourself. And here you can see the person, you can see the thoughts, see the story, and feel that you're not identified with any of that. You do not need to know how to live, because you open to being life itself, and life, it knows how to live. Life knows how to live. But the mind continues to think that it needs to know, it needs to understand. It does not need to know, it does not need to understand. And cannot tell it that, cannot be in the realm of the story trying to get somewhere. It's a maze. Can only be the awareness of it and feel the freedom that is always here. The freedom that is always here is always free, is never ever bound by the story, never ever bound. You are the vast ocean, and the vast ocean is blissful and radiant in the knowing of itself. You are never separated as a wave in the ocean. Yes, there are ebbs and flows, there are waves, but you are always the ocean, always the essence, nature. And in the silence, in the presence of being, in the stop, where silence just is, the knowing is here. Now here too, as we are speaking these words, what is also important is that if the eyes are closed, that there are moments where the eyes also open, because otherwise there is a sense of the person having an experience. And when the eyes are open, there is the ability to rest absorbed and recognize that the body is just an empty shell. And when we're resting really in the consciousness, we're not really right front and center in the body in sense perception. We're dropped back into the essence nature. So the eyes can be open, but the absorption in the being is still resting. There can be this meeting in the silence. What can happen is with the eyes closed, even if there's a following, the mind can still be really involved in the following. Whereas with the eyes open, there's a dropping back. There's a different way of being present, of following the pointings absorbed in the being, not following the pointings from the mind. Now, the mind never, ever, 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 ever gets this. It might think that it does because it can play with itself in the realm of, I think I've got it, I think I understand it. You know, it's like, let's say, like quantum physicists thinking that they've got it. And of course they haven't got it, because they're trying to fathom something through the mind that is completely and utterly unfathomable. But, you know, we do what we can. So here in the wide open field, what we are speaking of is, it's a quantum field. It's a quantum field. So where consciousness knows itself, it's awake to the intelligence of itself. And only when consciousness is awake to its own intelligence is there the ability to recognize the true essence nature, and then as consciousness to open to all of the things that quantum physicists are curious about, can just open within your own consciousness to all of it. It's all here. It's all here. So the mind can read a gazillion books and be very, very smart and think that it understands. But it is, in truth, it's always a partial understanding. The true understanding is only when we really come to the awakeness, where there's not me that's getting it, but where the consciousness itself is truly awake to itself. Where consciousness is truly awake to itself is in the silence, and the silence is the stop. It is a peace that is undisturbable. It is just to remember right here in the depths of silence that there is a knowing, a simple knowing that you are the silent being. You are the silent, awake field of awareness that is pure and simple and free, utter openness, a blissful equanimity, just always, always constant and the same.